Hello, everyone. It is good to be with you. I want to share a few thoughts with you, and I want to begin our short talk here today with a reading from John chapter 20, verses 19 to 22. John chapter 20, 19 to 22. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. And again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit." Bruce Holland is the publisher of Parkview News, which is a little newsletter that comes to our home each month in the Clayton Park West area. I think some of you would receive that as well. He opened up the April edition of the newsletter with an article that he wrote that really is an article thanking frontline workers in all sorts of areas, people working hard, often at risk, involved in keeping our essential services going. That would clearly include some of you who are watching and listening today. And I want to join him in expressing deep appreciation to those who are working so hard in these days. But Holland opened his article with this sentence, and it caught my attention in light of some thoughts that I knew I was going to be sharing with you. He writes this. He says, "It's times like this, in the midst of an epidemic crisis, when we find out as humanity who we really are and what we're really made of." A little later on, he says, "We learn a lot about ourselves in times like these." His words in that little newsletter reminded me of a message that I had heard earlier in the week from pastor and teacher and author Ed Stetzer. Ed Stetzer is Billy Graham Distinguished Chair of Church, Mission, and Evangelism at Wheaton College. How's that for a handle? He is also the executive director of the Billy Graham Center at Wheaton College. And Stetzer was speaking on this passage, the passage we read in John chapter 20. And in fact, I'm going to be leaning on some of Stetzer's thoughts in our time today. But he refers to an article in that talk. He refers to an article that he wrote for USA Today, titled, in part, "Removing the Coronavirus Mask." The article references, of course, the whole challenge of wearing or not wearing masks. But he goes on to say this. He says, "I think this virus will take off some masks and help reveal our true selves. And I think a whole lot of masks are about to come down," Stetzer says. "I believe serving and loving others as Christ himself has served us, even through his death and resurrection, is central to our faith, even when it involves personal risk and cost. That's what I hope this crisis will reveal," Stetzer says. "Social distancing may be necessary, but relational distancing is not. Let's build bridges as we can," he says. "During the pandemic, we will be separated and we will have to stick together. Let's show who we really are as Christians in our day." Early church historian Eusebius was also bishop of Caesarea in Palestine in the early 300s AD. And he records the response of many Christians during a plague in his day. He says, "All day long, some of them," referring to Christians, "some of them tended to the dying and to their burial. Countless numbers of them with no one to care for them. Others gathered from all parts of the city, a multitude of those withered from famine, and they began to distribute bread to them." Eusebius goes on in his record of history to say that because of their compassion in the midst of the plague, the Christians, and this is a quote, "the Christians' deeds were on everyone's lips, and they glorified the God of the Christians." Will that be true in our day? I pray that it will be true of me, true of you. The Christians' deeds were on everyone's lips, and they glorified the God of the Christians. We know a little bit more in this day about plague, about viruses. There are clearly precautions that we need to show and to have in order to be caring and compassionate. We need to be cautious. But let me encourage you to continue and even to find new ways to demonstrate the love and compassion of Christ in practical ways. And to the sharing of the good news, give attention. Take opportunity to share the good news of God's grace and his forgiveness. I believe God will give us different opportunities, unique opportunities at this time and in this day. Part of what I want to do in this brief message is, in some ways, just to cheer you on in your witness to Christ. We have the power and the encouragement of the Holy Spirit, and sometimes the Holy Spirit uses us to encourage one another. So I want you to be encouraged. So many of you are finding ways to connect, ways to care, ways to encourage. For some of you, that care is happening right there in your homes. Your servant heart, your care, your compassion is being shown right now, perhaps in a heightened way, with those that you're caring for in your homes. It can be difficult. It can be hard. And as we share, I suspect you've heard, as you've shared with others, that there is a weight, there is a challenge, there is a heaviness sometimes in caring, even as God empowers us, even as God leads us. It can be difficult, and so I want to encourage you. Some of you are finding really creative ways in your neighborhoods. Some of you reaching out to people far away globally. Some of you are helping in a powerful way, perhaps one of the most powerful ways, by praying for one another. I want to encourage you again to be prayerful. Lift up those who are in need. Lift up those who have particular responsibilities at this time, that God would encourage and equip and strengthen. Let me encourage you in all of this. For those of you that are listening as part of our congregation, I'm going to send out a resource a little bit later on in the week that lists a good number of ideas, perhaps some that you haven't thought of, practical ways for you, some aimed at our younger generation, our kids, practical ways to show the love of Christ. The disciples were huddled together in fear, being locked behind doors after the crucifixion. They were afraid clearly that they too would be harmed because of Jesus. But Jesus, the risen Jesus, came to them in that place and said, "Peace be with you." He showed them that what they were seeing was real. Yes, it was Jesus alive. He showed them his nail-scarred hands, his scarred side where he had been pierced. And he said it again to them, "Peace be with you." He gave them the gift of the Holy Spirit and said, "As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." As God the Father sent the Son in love for us, so by the power of the Holy Spirit, Jesus sends his followers to be messengers of his grace and forgiveness, instruments of his love and compassion. Some of you may be able to relate to being behind closed doors. Many of us can. Some of you can relate to the reality of fear. I hope you have people to talk to or people that you can call. I want to encourage you as part of church family here to talk with one another. Be open about those things that you're dealing with and struggling with. Some of you can relate to that sense of fear in these days. The fear for us is different, of course, than for those first disciples, but it's fear nonetheless. My prayer today is that the risen, resurrected Jesus, alive today, present in power by his Spirit, will meet you, will meet me, will meet us right here, right where we are even now. My prayer is that we will know his peace, that his peace will truly be yours, that his peace will be with you. In the deepest, most profound way, his peace comes to our lives received by faith. Peace at the deepest level has been won for us through Jesus on the cross. He was pierced for our transgressions. If you have not received that gift of grace and peace, forgiveness, let me invite you to come in faith, confessing sin, believing and receiving Jesus and his love, Jesus and his peace. We need not be overwhelmed by failure or fear. Through faith in Jesus, he gives us his gift of peace, peace for our soul and peace for our situation as he is with us. I want to encourage you today. This peace is very personal, but this passage reminds us that we need to make this peace, this compassionate love of God, very public. May God lead us deeper into his peace personally, but may he also use us, our words and our deeds in these days, by the power of his Spirit, to share his love with others. Masks are important these days, but in a spiritual sense, I pray that masks will come off and that even in these times, people will see the love of God in us, even the face of Christ in us, and God will be glorified. Let me encourage you in these days. God bless you.